Tonight, I will tell you a story the way all the stories are meant to be told, slowly, clearly, with pictures in your mind. The kind of story that feels like a blanket being pulled up on your chin. Long ago, in a village that sat right beside the sea, there was a small house on a hill. It wasn't a big house. It wasn't fancy. It was the sort of house you might draw with a simple pencil. A slanted roof, a chimney, and one bright window that always seemed to glow at night. People in the village called it the lantern house, and the one who lived there was called the lantern keeper. His real name was Elias, but almost no one said it because everyone already knew what he did. Every evening, every single evening, no matter the weather, Elias would climb the short wooden stairs to the balcony, carry a lantern made of copper and glass, and light it with a steady hand. Then he would hang it on a hook where it could be seen from the shore. When the lantern was lit, sailors on the water felt their shoulders loosen. When the lantern was lit, fishermen in small boats knew exactly where the safe rocks were. When the lantern was lit, even children in the village, tucked into bed, felt something quiet settle in their chests, the way you feel when you realize someone is watching over you. Elias had been the lantern keeper since he was young. His father had been the lantern keeper before him, and his father before that. It was a family job, but it was more than a job. It was a promise that night would not be allowed to become too lonely, a promise that the sea would not be allowed to become too cruel, a promise that if you were out there in the dark, there would be a light waiting for you. Elias liked his work. He liked the simple routine of it. He liked the small sounds of the evening. The kettle on the stove, the soft ticking clock, the wind wandering around the corners of the house. He liked the way the lantern flame moved. Never frantic, never wild, just alive. But there was one thing Elias did not like. He did not like storms. Most people in the village disliked storms because storms were loud and wet and made the streets muddy. Elias disliked storms for a different reason because storms could hide the lantern. And when the lantern was hidden, even for a little while, the sea became a place where mistakes could happen. On the night this story begins, there was a storm, not a violent, angry storm with thunder that cracks the sky. This was a storm that arrived with patience. It began as a thick blanket of clouds that rolled in slowly, like a dark curtain being drawn across the horizon. Then the rain came, soft at first, then steadier, then persistent. The wind followed, not screaming, but pushing, nudging, leaning its whole invisible shoulder against the road. In the village, people closed shutters and tied down loose things. And in the lantern house, Elias did what he always did. He filled his lantern with oil. He checked the wick. He lit it carefully, protecting the flame with his hand. And he carried it out to the balcony. The rain tapped against the roof. The wind tugged at his sleeves, but Elias was steady. He hooked the lantern into place, and the warm light spilled out into the storm. From the shore below, you could see it, a little gold circle, calm and stubborn, holding its ground against the dark. Elias stood there for a moment, watching it. The sea below was restless. The waves did not crash wildly, but they rolled in with heavy shoulders, one after another, as if the ocean were breathing through a bad dream. Elias watched it until he was satisfied. Then he went back inside, wiped his hands on a cloth, and put a pot of tea on the stove. That is when he heard the sound. It was not the rain, it was not the wind, it was something else. A long, low note like a distant horn, except after almost sat. Elias froze with the kettle in his hand. The sound came again, a low, mournful call that seemed to rise up from the sea itself. He set the kettle down and stepped back into the window. He peered out through the rain-streaked glass. Down at the waterline near the rocks, the sea looked different. Not calmer, not rougher. Different in a way his eyes could not name right away. Then he saw it. Out beyond the rocks, where the water dipped into deeper darkness, there was a shape. It was huge, very large. At first, it looked like a shadow beneath the waves, but then it moved, and then faint lantern light cut something on its surface, a shimmer like starlight caught in wet skin. Elias' mouth went dry. He had lived by the sea his whole life. He had seen dolphins, he had seen seals, he had once seen a whale far out at sea, a black curve and a white spray. But this was not like that. This shape moved slowly, as if the storm did not bother at all. And when it rose, just a little, the lantern light revealed something impossible. The shape was speckled with points of pale lights, not reflections, not foam, lights like star. Elias started until his eyes began to ache. Storm pressed against the window, the lantern burned steadily behind him, and the creature outside, this enormous, gentle thing, released another long call. This one sounded closer, not threatening, not angry, just calling. Elias did something very brave and very foolish all at once. He put on his coat, he grabbed the second lantern, the smaller one he used for walking, and he stepped out into the storm. The wind pushed him immediately, as if trying to turn him back. Rain filled the air and dotted his eyelashes. But he kept going, down the hill, along the muddy path, toward the shore. The village was quiet. Everyone was inside. Only Elias walked out into the night. When he reached the beach, the waves pulled at the stones, and the wet sand shone like black glasses. The great shape was still there, just beyond the rocks. It rose slightly, and the points of light along its back glimmered. Elias held his lantern light high, not as a challenge, but as a greeting. "I can see you," he called, his voice nearly swallowed by the wind. The creature's head lifted a little more, its eyes, large as a dinner plate, dark and glossy, turned toward him. And then, in a way that made Elias's skin prickle, he felt something in his chest. Not a sound, not a word, a feeling, like someone had opened the door inside him and let a memory walk in. He saw, just for a moment, an image of a deep water, a long corridor of blue-black sea, a path beneath the waves where no human boat could ever go. And along that path, drifting slowly, was the creature itself. A whale, yes, but not an ordinary whale, a star whale, a creature that carried starlight on its back the way some animals carry patterns on their fur. Elias blinked hard, and the image faded. He swallowed. "You're lost," he said, though he didn't know how he knew. The whale released a sound that was not quite a call this time. It was softer, lower, as if agreeing. Elias looked up toward the lantern house. The bright lantern still burned on the balcony, a warm eye watching over the storm. Then he looked back at the whale, and Elias understood something important, something that made his heart tighten. The lantern house wasn't only for fishermen and sailors. It was for anyone who needed a light, even a creature from the deep, especially a creature from the deep. Elias stepped closer to the waterline. The tide rolled in and licked the tips of his boots. He raised his lantern again, and he spoke as gently as he could. "I can't come out there," he said, "but I can guide you." The whale's eye remained on him. The storm seemed to pause between gusts, like it was listening to. Elias turned, then, and began to walk along the shore. He walked slowly, lifting his lantern so the light could be seen. He walked toward the safest stretch of water, always from the rocks, toward the open sea. Behind him, the whale moved, not quickly, not with panic. It followed the lantern the way A tired child follows a parent through a dark hallway. Elias's arm began to ache from holding the lantern up, but he did not lower it. The wind tugged at his coat. Rain soaked his hair. Still he walked, and the whale followed. They went like that for some time. Elias on the shore, the whale in the water, until they reached a part of the coast where the sea was deeper and safer. The rocks there were fewer, the current was gentler. Elias stopped and held the lantern very still. The whale rose higher, and for a moment starlight across its back shone brighter, as if the lantern's warmth had awakened it. Elias felt that strange door in his chest opened again. He saw a memory that was not his, a memory of the whale swimming through a field of glowing creatures deep underwater, where everything was dark except tiny lights. A memory of a whale traveling with others long ago under skies full of real stars. A memory of separation, a storm, confusion, and then loneliness. Elias's throat tightened. "You're far from home," he whispered. The whale made a sound, soft and low, like a sigh. Elias did not know what a human was supposed to do in front of a star whale. He could not read it. He could not touch it. He could not promise that storms would never come back. But he could do one thing. He could keep a light. So he raised his lantern again and he made a promise out loud. The way you do when you want your words to become real. "I will keep the lantern burning," he said. "You can rest here, and when the storm passes, you can find your way." The whale's eye blinked slowly, once, twice. Then it lowered itself, sinking just beneath the waves, until only a faint glow remained visible, like a constellation underwater. Elias stood there in the rain, holding his lantern, feeling small and very awake. The storm continued, but the wind seemed less sharp now. Or perhaps Elias was simply calmer. Eventually, his arm trembled with fatigue. He lowered the lantern and turned back toward the village. The path up the hill felt longer in the rain, but when he reached the lantern house and looked back toward the sea, he could still see it, a faint shimmer in the dark water, a quiet cluster of light drifting gently. The star whale was resting. Elias went inside, dried his hand, and added more oil to the balcony lantern. He checked the flame twice. He stayed up longer than usual, sitting at the window and listening to the rain. At some point, the storm began to soften. The wind slowed, the rain became lighter as if it was growing tired. And then, without drama, morning arrived. Not bright, not sudden, just a pale gray light spreading slowly across the world. Elias stepped out onto the balcony with a warm cup of tea. The sea looked calmer now, like a creature that had finally relaxed its shoulders. And out beyond the rocks, where the water deepened, the star whale rose. Its back broke the surface. The starlight pattern along its skin glimmered in the early morning, softer than they had been at night, but still beautiful. Elias watched, holding his breath. The whale turned slowly and faced the lantern house. It released a single sound, low, gentle, not sad this time. It felt like thanks. Then, as if it knew exactly where it needed to go, it began to move out toward open sea. It did not rush, it did not splash, it simply traveled forward, steady and calm, disappearing into the wide water until the last shimmer of its light vanished. Elias stood there for a long time after it was gone. He felt something in his chest that was hard to name. Not fear, not excitement, something warmer, something like pride, something like tenderness. He went back inside, and that evening, when night came again, he lit the lantern as usual. But from that day, he did it with a slightly different feeling, because now he understood what his family's work truly was. It wasn't only about boats, it wasn't only about fishermen, it was about anyone, anywhere who might be lost in the dark. And so the lantern keeper kept his promise. Night after night he lit the lantern. And sometimes on very quiet nights, when the sky was clear and the sea was still, Elias thought he could see, far out on the horizon, a faint shimmer, as if starlight had dipped low to meet the water, as if somewhere out there the star whale was still traveling, still safe, still calm, and if you listen closely, on nights when rain taps softly on the window, you might imagine the same thing. A gentle light, a quiet ocean, and a story that ends the way bedtime stories should, with everything returning to peace.